Taylor Ellwood back here again, take two, because I had technical difficulties. Hopefully this time everything goes through smoothly. Occasionally with these videos, you're doing them, and then all of a sudden they just go down in terms of the connection quality, and at that point, it just looks bad because you're like talking, but it's super slow if it even goes through. Okay, so today we're going to talk about part 2 of how to use magic to apply pressure to a situation where you're trying to get better results, like in your workplace or in other circumstances. Now, what prompted me to do a part 2 was that a person left a comment for me on the YouTube channel saying, to apply pressure, at least to me, means layering your approach to changing your problem. And he says what he used to do was throw 1 or 2 rituals at a problem, and sometimes this would bring relief, and other times it dragged on. And he says, these days I remind myself to think first and figure out who and what all the players are in his situation, and that's good. And then he says he wishes it was simpler, and he's maybe overthinking it. Well, I agree, you are overthinking it. So here's the thing to consider. Yes, when you're putting together a magical working, and it's a working where you're dealing with other people, and other variables, you're always going to try and factor those in. But I think that at a certain point, you have to learn how to let go of control with your magical work. And what I mean by that is, if I do a magical working, and let's say there's multiple people in it, and I want to influence all those people, I have to at a certain point decide, if that's really even going to be cost effective. My approach to doing magical work when it comes to influencing people is really to keep it simple and get rid of needless complexity. And so let's talk first about needless complexity and what that means. I define needless complexity as anything where the situation is overly complex, or rather, what you're doing is you're making it overly complex with whatever it is that you're trying to do. Case in point, the person who mentioned in his comments that he did, multiple workings. Multiple workings would definitely be an example to solve a problem, would definitely be an example of needless complexity. And here's why. When you're doing multiple workings, what you're doing is you're creating a situation where you're applying multiple workings to this situation to resolve it. But what's happening is you're saying, hey, Spirit A, come over here, and I'm going to do Practical Magic B and something else C over here. And you're muddying up the water. And not only that, but you're obsessing and fixating over the result, because you're trying to accomplish something and you're not really getting anywhere with it. You're pushing it out from you. You're keeping it further away. Well, when you push something out, when you keep it further away from you because you obsess about it, what ends up happening is you keep it from generating the results that you really want. Now, in my new book, which I just got in the mail, How to Troubleshoot Your Magic, one of the things that I talk about in that book is how to deal with the fixation, the tendency to obsess, and what you do with it. Aleister Crowley called it lust for results, which, hey, good term. I'll give him that one. His approach was to banish. I have never found that to be useful. So if I find myself obsessing over something, what I do is I take that obsession and I redirect it. And what I mean by that is, let's say that I'm really anxious about a job that I'm trying to do job magic for, as an example. It's an easy one. I let that anxiety get to me, and it's going to keep that job away from me. But what I can try and banish that anxiety, but really, what am I doing then? I'm just repressing it or suppressing it. And you know what? When you suppress something, it just gets stronger. You can push it down, but then it just comes back up. We don't want that. So my recommendation instead is to take that emotional energy and redirect it. Basically take it and apply it to your magical working. Feed it in. So when I design my magical workings and I'm trying to apply pressure to a situation to get something that I want, whether it's a job or whether it's a better work environment or something else along those lines, the thing that I do is I don't always look at all the external variables and try to calculate them. Admittedly, I do a lot of the time. But sometimes I realize, like with people, you can only calculate so far. You can only anticipate so much before you just kind of have to say, okay, I'm going to let it go and leave it up to just doing what I need to do. But what you can control is you can control yourself. And this is part of where I keep things simple, because if I focus on what I can control, then I can already take that which I control and add it into my magical working and make that magical working much more effective. In the case of job hunting, I can go out there and fill out applications. I can go out there and do interviews and do my resume. The other thing I can do is I can take those emotions and feed that into the activity that I'm doing and into the magical working itself to make the magical working stronger. So that every time I feel anxiety or fear or anything else, I just take it and I feed it right into the magical working. And what I do is I set my magical workings up as essentially, I think of them as programs. Like, okay, I've designed this magical working. It's going to accomplish X. Now, I can take that magical working at any time and I can start changing things and manipulating it. You might say, well, how can you do that, Taylor? I mean, when you're doing the magical working, isn't that it? It's just set in stone. And I disagree with that. A magical working is not set in stone. You are always connected to that magical working by virtue of the fact that you've done the working. And if you take my approach and you treat a magical working as kind of as a programming, like you're trying to program a specific result, then what you can do is you can go in and tweak that programming because you always have access to it. Like for example, when I do a magical working and then I realize, okay, maybe the working isn't getting me the results I want, what I do is I basically just connect to that moment when I did the ritual and I change a couple things in terms of what I was programming the ritual for. And then I let it go back to doing what it needs to do. The magical working's now tweaked. Now it's going to go and perform its things. And so by taking this very, very realistic approach to your magical working, where you realize that really you have access to those magical workings and to the moments, and that you can tweak and change them accordingly, it makes it a lot simpler. So instead of doing multiple workings where you're trying to get all these things to happen all at the same time and you're trying to make everything happen and all this other stuff, chill out. Do the magical working. If you realize that you're not getting the result you want, make some adjustments to that working. But keep it simple. Get rid of the needless complexity. If you were to look at how I approach doing magical work in general, I take a minimalist approach. I use what is absolutely necessary and no more. And the reason why I use only what is absolutely necessary and no more is because I don't want to make it more complex than it needs to be. And when I talk about complexity in this, I want to point out too that complexity to me is really anything that you're doing that you either don't have a full understanding of why you're doing it and what it's being done for, or you're doing it because it's like, well, this is the way they say it in the books, and I've got to add all these things in. I've got to have all the bells and whistles. You don't need all the bells and whistles unless you want them, unless they're absolutely essential. What I do when I'm applying magic to situations is I only do what is absolutely essential. And I take this from a model of I guess philosophy called essentialism, which is really just, get laser focused on what's really important to you, get rid of all the distractions, and only do those things. As a good example for me, even this year, I have focused really on my writing. A year ago, this month, I got back my writing, all my books. And I had self-published 2 of them, but I got back all the other books. I got new covers done, and I got them republished. And then what I started doing is I started writing and writing additional books. And my focus was really on like what's essential to me. Well, what's essential to me is writing books on magic and writing fiction too, because I'm doing that right now. Nothing else. I'm not focused on trying to teach classes. I'm not focused on consulting or anything else along those lines. I might at some point do some of that. But my focus has been lasering in and focusing on what's essential. And so a lot of my magical activity has also been around that, because I've been like, okay, well, what can I do to help myself get the resources that I need to become better at this? And what can I do to be more creative? What can I do to achieve specific goals that I want to achieve? My goal for this year was to publish 6 books. Guess what? It's only October, and my 6th book gets published on Monday, my birthday. Yay. The book that you just saw was the 5th book. I'm already at work on a 7th book, so I'm trying for a stretch goal of 7 books at this point. We'll see if I get it done or not, but either way, at least I'm working on it. I'm staying focused. And it's the same thing with your magic. Like, if you know what you want, then stay focused on that. Don't let distractions get in your way, and that includes your magical work. When you're doing magical work and you're getting caught up in all the bells and whistles, and I've got to have Crystal X and Athame Y and all this other stuff, I'm not saying that maybe that stuff isn't essential, but evaluate it for whether or not it's essential. Ask yourself, why is this essential? What is it actually helping me do? And the same thing goes with your magical working. If you know the result you want, don't do multiple workings, because multiple workings it's going to create needless complexity. It's going to muddy up the water, and it's going to keep you from actually focusing on the essential, which is living your life. Do your magical working and then live your life and let the magic happen. Don't keep going back to doing the magical working. And if you say, well, Taylor, I'm not getting the result I want, well, okay, then let's open up the hood. Let's get under the hood of that magical working and figure out why, what's going on, what needs to be tweaked or changed, magically or mundanely. Make those tweaks and then go back to living your life. It's really as simple as that. And a lot of people make magic so much more complicated because they think that it has to be complicated, and it doesn't. It really doesn't. It really comes right down to understanding what is essential and focusing on that. I'm going to be talking a lot more about this and actually writing at least a couple books on this topic, because I think it's something that we really need. In fact, really, the How to Troubleshoot Your Magic book is a direct response to the fact that I think that a lot of magical workings are too complicated. More complicated than they need to be. Let's strip out the complexity. Let's focus on what really makes it work. And I want to be very clear here. What's essential to me may not be essential to you. So it's not about copying Taylor Ellwood and doing what Taylor Ellwood does, okay? It's about figuring out what's essential and trusting yourself to go after that instead of and doing what you know is essential for you. What's essential for you may not be the same thing as it is for me, and that's okay. It's not about doing what Taylor Ellwood does. It's about taking the concepts that I'm sharing with you and applying them to your magic with a critical eye so that you can become better, regardless of the way that you do it. Okay, that's it for this week. Next week, I'm going to actually do the video a little earlier in the week because I'm going to be away on Thursday when I normally would do it. So see you next week on Tuesday. And in the meantime, thanks for watching. And if you have questions, comments, feel free to leave them in the thing. And if you haven't checked out my new book yet, go check it out. It's awesome, amazing. And thank you all. You're wonderful people.